This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Good evening and welcome to Go and Grow. Huh? Tonight we have here what I call my master gardener, Hashim Bennett Sr. Huh? Before we get started, I just want to mention that this is really trying to, as many people as possible, encourage them and empower them to learn how to grow their food for multiple reasons, health, economics, and even environment. So I'm looking forward to talking to my brother here, Hashim, who knows all about everything. All right, when it comes to gardening.
don't
And
don't don't sell it too hard.
okay, all right. All right. He definitely knows a lot more than me, and that's why I have him here. And as our guest is, you know, Mr. James Days, who also, you know, uh, gardens a bit and has a little bit of knowledge. So, with that being said, we're gonna get this started, and we really want to kind of take people from the beginning, and then we'll just go in and we'll just let it flow, uh, as we see fit. Okay, all right. You gentlemen
Mhm.
okay with that?
Yes. Sounds good.
All right. All right. So I always like to try, being that this is the first session this season, and I know Hashim, you probably saying we're starting a little late, but
I feel like it's still kind of early. Up here in
really,
Jersey, you
okay.
guys are further south,
Hmm.
but in Jersey, it's still a little chilly, and stuff doesn't go outside until Mother's Day. So we still got another week or two.
Oh, okay. Uh, it's actually been, I'm here in North Carolina, and just for people who may watch the recording, Hashim is up in the Northeast in New Jersey, uh, as well as, and James is actually in between. He might be a little stretched right about now, but he also will be moving south. Because weather here has been sporadic. It's been a lot of rain. Uh, so it changes a lot. And I'm just now, we're slowly trying to get into gardening, but we're still doing it in pots, outdoor pots. And we are considering doing some raised beds this year. So, Brother Hashim, I just want to ask, again, for someone who's absolutely new to gardening, what
Hmm.
what would be your recommendations in terms of where they should start, maybe where they should go, what should they have? What are some of the first things? Again, you just tell them like a friend or a family member, this is what you should do if you're getting started.
Yeah. It's funny because I have a cousin. I just built some planter boxes for her, and we're starting with herbs. All of the basil, parsley, thyme, oregano, a lot of those small leafy greens that'll grow with little help. You just put them in the ground and they'll grow. They don't have to be fertilized as often. So starting with herbs and starting in containers is always the best way to go if you want to keep it real simple.
Okay.
um, you can't go wrong. um, the watering is kind of basic. It doesn't require too much water. They can deal with a little bit of drought, because like your parsley is it's winter hardy, same as the thyme and the oregano. So even if you left it sitting over the winter, it'll still grow. So a lot of these plants, you can just sit them in the ground and they'll do what they're supposed to do. So for a
Okay.
beginner, starting in a container and with some of the herbs, I feel like you can't go wrong.
Okay. Uh, I know for me that's where I started. Well, actually, two places. I started with herbs because I thought again it was simple, small pot. You can grow in a small area, and then say I grew some and I started doing some seeds. And I was just doing those in bigger pots. Literally no rhyme or reason. I just figured, you know what could go wrong? I throw some seeds in the pot and I see what happens. And then, you start to see some things grow and then you get a little excited. And then you just keep, you learn a little bit more and you move. Mhm. And speaking of that, I just learned today, and I'd like to get your thoughts on when you mentioned about containers. I never really gave it much thought because, again, I still consider myself a newbie, but the different types of pots as far as material.
Uh,
how it makes a difference. And what I learned was the difference between, like, say, plastic versus ceramic versus gosh, the other pot, the clay pots that been around for
terracotta.
1,000 years. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Um,
Hmm, hmm.
yeah, what are your thoughts on the
So
difference
you know,
in pot?
the difference in pots comes down to how often you need to water. And how,
Mm,
if you're gonna forget to water, you might want to consider a different type of pot. Because the plastic is
mm,
gonna keep the water in. Something ceramic with it's got a ceramic coating. It's not porous. It's gonna keep
mm,
that moisture in also. You get something like the planter boxes that I mentioned. They're made of wood. It's gonna absorb a lot of that moisture. Where something like the terracotta is gonna do the same thing. It's gonna wick that moisture away from the soil. So you got to be mindful of your watering practices, depending on the
mm.
type of pot that you're using. Um, if it's porous, it's going to need to be watered more often, is the general case.
Okay.
If you're not that guy, you know, get the plastic, get the ceramic, get something that's going to keep that moisture in there, and make it safer for yourself.
Okay. Mm. 'Cause like I said, up until today, I never gave it much thought from I'm gonna say from the plant's perspective. I thought about from my perspective, what pot looked nice, you know,
Hmm.
what was the most inexpensive. I just weighed those things. Never really thought, wow, this makes a difference based off of what your
Yeah.
intentions are. Mhm,
And the roots behave differently too. When it rubs up against the plastic, it'll turn the corner and start to girdle and make a circle around the entire root, forming a ball. Whereas with terracotta, it hits the terracotta and it's going to stop and then branch off in opposite directions, where you just get a better pattern for finding nutrients and not strangling yourself with those roots forming a coil. Um, so the different type of materials the roots will behave differently too. Um,
wow,
you know,
that's actually cool, really cool to know because I'm thinking, as soon as you said that the terracotta would probably be better for when you're going to transfer those plants to the soil versus, and like I said, I know when I pulled a plant out of a plastic pot, and at the bottom you can see them going all at the bottom,
hmm,
and
hmm.
if you don't have proper drainage, I've also found you end up with your roots all soggy.
And
Mhm,
that's the key right there. Root rot is serious. If you're using plastic containers, it's not going to drain. So if that water is logging, like you said, it's going to cause some problems. You definitely want to have some good drains. That hole in the bottom, is
mhm.
there for a reason.
Yes. Mm. Now, again, starting out, again, say somebody new, is there a preferred place for someone to go to get, say, their supplies?
Mm.
You know,
So Amazon it's going to deliver to your house. You can compare prices and you can return it if it's something that you don't want. So online shopping is sometimes a good way to go if you start with some of the basics, the smaller tools. But if you're getting into a little heavier outdoor type of gardening, you can start with the box stores, the Home Depot and Lowe's. Um, you can go to a lot of the nurseries that are local or far, if you depend on the type of plant you're looking for, because different nurseries will carry exotic plants depending on where you're going and where you're looking. So I've always found the nurseries, you find a pretty good selection. You want to have as many options to kind of figure out what works best for you. Um, when you go to these box stores, a lot of times they already have a set display that kind of just it's what it is. So,
mhm,
and they don't have people as knowledgeable. So if you had questions while you're there shopping at a nursery, somebody could probably answer more of your questions than somebody at one of the bigger box stores, and give you some good feedback. But
uh,
and friends, I mean, I get a lot of stuff from people that already have been gardening, and even if I have you know, 3 shovels. It's like sometimes I'll pick up another one because somebody wants to get rid of it, and I'll give it to a friend, or I'll. But it's like going to people that you know that are gardening is sometimes a good place to get some things that, seeds, fertilizer. Some people will have extra soil, and so tapping into to any and everyone who might know something about growing is probably one of the best places to start.
Okay. Because I believe, right before this session, that actually happened. Somebody had
Okay.
had some supplies that said, "Hey, you know what? Swing by and you can pick them up." So you're absolutely right. Uh, those connections. So yeah, again, I learned a lot from my friend Mitchell, who was, she's been, gardening for a while, and I found, just with going to, like, to your point, going to a nursery, that people do seem to be a lot more knowledgeable, uh, you know, about what's on the floor and about helping you. Uh,
They're
and the other
definitely
thing
willing. I
too,
mean, go ahead. I'm
no, go,
sorry.
no, I was gonna say, and the other thing too is I've learned. I tell people, you gotta go to like YouTube. I've joined. There's a bunch of groups on Facebook where you get to post questions and people will respond. There's so many resources. You know, uh, so I tell people, learn, apply, ask questions. But
Yeah,
definitely I know
and
it's a difference
books.
between yes and books. You know.
There's
Now,
plenty of books.
you figure, I mean, I wouldn't say for medical decisions, but as you stated with YouTube, literally, if you play around with 2 or 3 sentences that you feel might be in an article, between an article or a video, you can become an expert in a particular subject. The right phrase and the
Yes. Yes. You
Mm-hmm.
know.
Because it's all
Uh,
about the language. If you can find the key words and understand how to use them, like you say, YouTube, you can search for things and find top top notch. I mean, you can find information from universities that are doing research. You know,
mhm.
you can find quality level information.
Absolutely. So I say in general, the people are using the internet for education and entertainment because there is a lot of valid content out there. Now, I remember, right before it got really hot, Apple used to have what they call Apple University, and they used
Mm.
to post all of their content from major colleges online. And it was just, unbelievable. So, to both of your points, yeah, leverage YouTube, Google, because if nothing else, it'll get you to a point to be able to ask questions. Because you'll see some
And get
things
some of
that,
the basic information out the way. Yeah, it'll
Mhm.
get you rolling where you can feel more confident going into those next levels.
Right. Now, do you do? I know the last time we had you, on, you showed us your outdoor garden. Do you do any indoor gardening?
I do. I mean, I actually have been building this prototype, a living wall, where it operates, has a reservoir, and it might not be so easy to see, but I got some plants growing in here, and this box has water in it. You can see the irrigation line. This comes up, drips down. This is my first prototype, though,
Okay.
where I'm going to be putting some herbs in there now that it's summer and I get a little more light, and trying to do more of a hydroponic thing on the wall where it's decorative too.
All right. That's cool. How long have you been working on that?
Um, I've been talking about it for longer than I probably care to admit. You know how that goes. Um, and it's where I've been at least for a few months, because some of it I tried where it failed. I learned from that, built the new one, took that one apart. I built this one, on a small scale. So let me just let this run for a few months. It's been about 3 months running where it's working pretty well. No leaks. The plants are healthy. I'm looking to get some light so that it's got everything in there. It's like a one-stop growing wall hanging art piece. So yeah, it's working out well.
Now that you mentioned that you're building it for herbs, actually, I want to go back almost to piggyback off of my initial questions, which was you start out from herbs. What would be your next stage for, again, someone starting out that maybe they could do indoors? And at
Hmm.
what point should someone say you definitely have to go outdoors? Is there a demarcation between that transition from indoor to outdoor?
Yeah, pretty. I mean, the bigger the vegetable, the more sun it's going to need, the more light it's
Okay.
going to need. Once you look at the plant requirements, it'll tell you how much sunlight it'll need per day. Some plants it's 6 to 8 hours. Some plants it's shade, sun areas where it doesn't have to be direct and full. So you really have to know the plant. Like watermelons, they need 10 hours of sun a day. If you're not getting 10
Mm,
hours of sun on a watermelon, it's going to be a little small. It's not going to be as sweet. Um, but then other plants like tomatoes, well, tomatoes need a lot of sun too, but okra can go grow well sometimes in the shade. But most times you're going to need to just understand how much light the plant is going to need. If it's 6 hours, like I said, of full sun, if it's 4 hours, if it's 10 hours, and if it's a fruiting plant, you're probably going to need at least 6 to 8 hours. If it's like your kale and collard greens, your cabbage, where it's just leaves that are, not fruiting, you can get away with less sunlight. But you generally have to know how much light the plant needs. So if it's indoors, you can start everything indoors. But once it gets mature, it's got about 6 leaves on it. It's like that little boy who wants some elbow room. You're gonna have to put him out.
okay.
Get him outside, let him run around.
Mm, mm. Uh, the other thing that I trying to jump ahead, but when you mentioned about sunlight, the other thing I've been reading about, I have not taken it in terms of my approach because I think it's just a little bit too much work for me right now. But being able to balance, like creating your community in your
Yeah.
garden. Right now I'm at that point where everybody's going. You move right next door to like the plants, whatever I have, you're gonna go right next door. But I know that there's a strategy. Uh,
Hmm.
so what you might grow next to, what plants you might grow next to each other. Um, is that hardcore definite, or is it just preferred?
It's probably more realistic and hardcore than people want to acknowledge. Like,
Okay.
people want what they want. Like, people like tomatoes, and they say, "I'm gonna grow tomatoes." And if you don't rotate your tomato crops, the soil won't have the nutrients to grow the tomatoes you want. And so you're gonna have to say, okay, I gotta either rotate my crop or introduce another crop that's gonna replace those nutrients. So being mindful of those type of strategies is key to getting the yields that you want.
Okay.
Just like sister crops, the three sisters, what is it? The squash, the corn, and squash, corn, and the beans, the pole beans that climb the corn, right? So the squash will lay out shade to keep the weeds from growing, and the corn provides structure for the beans to grow up. Those kind of combinations, have been around for generations, and understanding how that works is in your benefit. To
Okay.
understand how to sequence your gardening and your growing, it gets you the best yield. So you have to know what you want to eat and then decide how much of it you're going to grow, and plan it out. It's kind of like anything, if you don't plan for it, you'll end up with something that you're not expecting. So,
Mm,
you
Brother
know,
Hush, it was something because, I had done gardening over a number of years be- I did it haphazardly.
hmm hmm
Put, you know what? I would say put seed down, put water on seed, let God do the rest. You
That's
know,
where I am. That's where I.
Yes,
and
sir.
it was no real method. But then when I started learning simple things like, okay, if you're going to have cucumbers and they're going to have flowers and you need them to pollinate, and then you can, put certain plants near it so that it brings the bees so that it may pollinate the flowers so you may have the crop.
Yeah,
You
you
know,
go.
once there was a method to it, next thing I know, I was giving my neighbors produce because it
Awesome.
was producing produce.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm, mhm.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. That production is real. Those cucumbers, you get 50 cucumbers and you can't eat them all. Same with the
Mhm.
tomatoes. You got to be able to give them away or have something to do with it. And if you don't plan for that harvest, it'll be overwhelming, because you'll get a ton of fruit and then it'll be sitting there and you'll feel bad because it's not going to nobody.
Mhm. I got a little bit of that exposure when I was growing in the community garden in New Jersey and learning how to put things like marigolds,
Yeah.
plants, and then learning how to put things in your garden to keep certain pests away. Now,
Hmm.
you know,
Correct.
but I'm still where you were, James, where I still do things haphazardly. Uh, I think when I graduate to actually doing the garden beds down here, I may, really become a little more methodical. Mhm. And speaking of
Hmm.
garden beds, I actually believe I had someone from the community garden in Broadway call me, a councilman who oversees the garden. He just called me out of the blue earlier today. I had not spoken to him in probably a year. And he mentioned that they were changing the garden beds from wood to metal. And I thought, again, that was interesting because I don't know if I've ever seen metal gardens at a community garden. I mean, metal beds at a community garden. Any thoughts on that, Hashim? Metal versus
Yeah,
wood?
so
Mhm.
the turnaround on building a raised bed has been the issue or the conversation I'm hearing more often because wood, even pressure treated, is only going to last you a given amount of time. The wood's going to last you, what, 5 years, maybe a little longer if you're lucky. But that metal, that can go for twice as long, three, four, five times as long if it's well kept. And that changes what you can do. You can go for
Mhm.
crops that may need, a little longer to mature because, like asparagus, it takes 3 years to mature. So if you build it in a metal bed, at least you know that's not going anywhere.
Okay.
Um, and then some folks like the durability. You know, it's sometimes a matter of convenience because some price can be an issue, but a lot of times it's what level of durability do you want? You know, because those
Uh,
metal beds they'll last you for a while.
Okay. And that was actually his point for them switching them out was he said that the wood beds were starting to get bugs. I think he said some of them maybe had termites, but they were starting to, wear the wood out. And then he also mentioned too, going forward, the metal beds will last much longer. So I thought that was interesting. The other thing I want to jump on that, again, when I first started this, I learned, and it was just like one of those things, like those aha moments, which was, and I always, mention this to people, the difference between dirt and soil. you know, you grow up, you think it's just dirt, it's all the same. But when you talk
Hmm.
about the nutrients, you know, and again, begin to understand that soil is it's a huge difference. So I want you just to run it down for people. They're not the same.
Absolutely not. It's like soil is a mixture that you put together and it's very specific. Dirt gets under your fingernails. That's the stuff that you can't use and it's just causing a problem. You know, I never met a lady who said, "Oh, look at that nice dirt under your fingernails." It's like, no,
Right.
the dirt gotta go. Okay, so dirt is the stuff that you find outside that's got rocks in it and glass, and it's a mixture of all
Mhm.
the stuff that's just sometimes waste. You know, and soil carefully mixed where you have compost, with the nutrients you mentioned. It's got moisture, retainers like the vermiculite or the peat moss or cocoa coir, as much as you have your worm castings. I mean, I looked at this one recipe for some soil and it had lobster shells and kelp, um, and all of that stuff. Of course, it gives you the minerals to the plants that lead to the growth that you want to see. Dirt, you don't know what's in it,
Okay.
you know?
Uh, uh, and on that note, you said you just saw something about lobster shells and kelp, and do you have any soil hacks? Like for instance, I have like several containers. In one container, I put in banana peels with eggshells. You know, um,
Hmm.
you know, another one I use pasta water. You know,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
then I got another one that actually uses water from uh, black beans. I'm one of
Hmm.
those like I'm one of those people like I try to upcycle, recycle, as much as I can. And so like with the banana peels, that was again something a hack I read, that it gives the potassium,
Hmm.
the eggshells gives the calcium. Um, and I actually just as a note, I put together a document to show the same, vitamins and minerals that we need as humans. Plants need the same thing and almost to
Hmm.
serve the same purpose. You know, so do you have any hacks that you use for besides just plain water to get your
It's a lot of
soil?
things you said. It's everything you said.
Okay.
Like compost tea is one of the first things I go for, which is just taking your compost and steeping it in water and using that water to water your plants, which is the same concept as you did with the banana in the water, the black beans, and having that water that comes from that. It's basically taking a plant and steeping it in water and allowing some of those nutrients to come out into the water. And any plant you use has something that's good for a plant to grow. It's kind of recycling itself. If you think of anything that you put in water, not for too long, of course, because you don't want the water to go bad. It'll end up getting rancid on you. Um, it's where you have to, give it a day or two, but allowing those nutrients to seep into the water can come from anywhere. If it's
Okay.
a plant source. And the being strategic is sometimes like the banana, the potassium is good for root structures. So having that ready for new growth and seedlings would be the timing you want for something like that. Um,
Okay.
so knowing what plant chemicals are in that mixture that you're using would just be the one thing to consider that affects your usage. But
All
it's all good. I mean, in terms of my hacks, it's similar. So the eggshells, you grind those up into powdery form if you can. Um, yeah, yeah, all of that.
Now you just
You
said
know,
something. Oh, James, you got something to say? Go ahead.
yes. You know what? The thing is when you talk about gardening, you know how many times we talk about, your diets, the way you eat, and we talk about garbage in, garbage out. Well, the thing is, I think one of the things that we must remember,
Bless you.
in reference to a
Thank you.
garden is we're basically creating a world, an ecosystem
Mm-hmm.
under which all of the nutrients and the things below, which are the important structures to a plant, are actually going to grow from. And
Hmm.
once we give it the particular nutrients that it needs, then we have to realize that whatever we put in our soil, not the dirt, as I
That's
say,
Right.
it.
basically going to go through the roots into the plants, into the leaves, into the fruits, into you.
Hmm.
And it's
So,
recycled
Yeah.
continually.
right,
Yes.
and that's the thing about it is, and when we do it, so you talk about, the different things. I've used lumps, mushroom compost, things of that sort. I've gone to Walmart or whatever, particular store that had earthworms and just thrown them in. Because you know what?
Hmm
There is a nutrient,
Hmm.
but their tunnels is an area,
Hmm.
you know?
And understanding that all of that is what makes a good gardener great. All of those simple things are not just simple. That worm aerating your garden and chewing up the organic matter and making it, processing it so that the plant can reuse it. All of that is critical to understand if you really want the yield and the production that you can that you want.
Both of you just
Yeah.
again raised again some really good points, and I'm thinking for the beginner gardener, because you mentioned in worms, and I remember again first learning about, oh, you really should have some worms in your soil, and again to your point about going and buying them. Now, and I don't know who I was mentioning this to, and about buying, and they laughed because they said, "Man, we used to dig up worms all the time when I was a kid, and now anytime I need to go buy them, uh,
Hmm
no, I mean, if you had a source, then go dig them up. But they're a very important part of gardening. To both your points, one, it aerates your soil, and two, it helps to keep the nutrients, you know, uh, within the soil. So for some people who they kind of get a little uh, like funny when you start talking about worms because then they think, oh, I got to handle worms. But you know what? Tell them you get used to it. After a while, at first it might seem a little weird, but you pick them up and you just throw them in a. Like I said, I picked up a couple yesterday, uh, outside, and I threw them in my pot. Now I observed them because I could see that they were trying to get back out the pot, you know,
hmm
back to the soil, external to the pot. But yeah, just look around. If you got wet soil anywhere around your house, you probably have some worms, and if not, yeah, you know, go buy them. Now, you mentioned something that I read, I have not seen yet, but you mentioned about the compost tea. You want to actually explain what that is, and that
it's
you can
much.
actually buy it. Mhm.
Well, I don't think you can buy it. Uh, I used to watch my mother just leave compost in her wheelbarrow in the backyard when it was raining, and then you let that sit for a couple of days, and you pour that liquid off into a bucket, and then you water your plants with it. You can create a compost tea by putting all the stuff in. I've seen some things on YouTube where he'll take compost, molasses, an aerator, and a 5-gallon bucket, and you throw all the stuff in there, and you kind of just let it bubble for a day or two, and then you use something like that to water your plants. Um, so that compost tea is kind of just what it sounds like. Just take
Okay.
some compost, some nutrient rich soil, and let it sit in some water for a day or two, not too much longer. Again, that's when those bacteria will kick up and you'll start having a little funky smell coming with it. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, a day or two, and you got some good water that you can use on your plants.
All right. So you make the compost tea. If you don't have say a composter, you can
Hmm
just get, like I said, 5-gallon bucket. Throw all of
Yeah,
your you know compost materials into the bucket with water and just let it sit for a couple of days. Is
yeah.
that
So
correct?
now, yes, the issue is going to be, of course, the solids that are there afterward. If you don't have a compost pile at your house, you're going to want to take it to a local garden or someplace where you can recycle it. Or, after you pour off the tea, you can just throw the solid pieces into the trash. Um,
Okay.
of course, if we're trying to get the most out of it, you'd want to try and use that waste material as a resource, as a recycling, you know.
Okay.
Um, well, like me, so I compost in a 5 gallon bucket in my house, and it's called Bokashi composting. And you take Bokashi bran or grain, which is infused with fungi, and you sprinkle
Okay.
that on your compost, and the fungi breaking down the food doesn't give you a smell the way that the bacteria does. So if bacteria is breaking
Mm,
down your compost, you get methane that smells
mm,
like farts. But then
mm,
the fungi
mm,
breaking down the food,
mm.
you don't have that kind of waste material. So it's where you put a lid on it, sprinkle some of that every time you throw in some vegetables. When it's full, you can add your water, switch that up, get your water poured off, and then dump the vegetables.
All right. And it's called Bagashi.
Bokashi,
Bo-
Bokoshi, I think.
Okay. Oh. Well, that's again good to know because I had I've been looking at indoor or small compost machines because everybody that I know who use compost they usually have a fairly large structure, you know. And I was just trying to find something on a smaller scale. I did come across a company that made an indoor one about the size of a like a kitchen garbage can. Uh,
Hmm.
I don't know what the prices were, but they had built it where it had I believe a charcoal filter to keep the smell.
Smell it down.
Yeah. But I thought that again that was pretty interesting. They show you pull a kind of the tray out and you see the nutrient rich soil. You know.
Hmm.
Uh, you know. So
Um,
go ahead. Mm,
Yeah, I was just thinking about that because I looked at those and the garbage can size devices. They intrigued me too. You know, I wonder about
mhm,
the turnover of the composting. Is it grinding it up to make it smaller and then
mm,
keeping it compressed? I just wonder about how it's um how it's making the soil and whether or not it's a longer process or is it a couple of months, couple of weeks? Is it because
mm,
cells are cells, and something to break down, like a banana, you
mm,
could throw in the dirt, and in 6 weeks it'll be gone.
mm,
Um, but that's a banana peel. A watermelon rind, or an orange peel, or a pineapple top is going to behave differently. So I wonder about how well those kitchen sized composters do the job.
mm. Uh, yeah, that's a good point. Like I said, I looked at them and from uh, the video that I saw, it looked again being a newbie, it looked amazing. I'm thinking, all right, that
Hmm.
may solve my problem. But you also again mentioned several things to consider is how how rich is a soil, you know, uh, that it's going to produce, or how rich is the compost going to be, and how long will it take? Mhm.
Yeah,
Uh,
and so
you go ahead.
yeah, just thinking about that, how long is the main question? Because the composting that I do, it can sit in here for maybe a week, maybe two before it's full, and
Mhm.
those vegetables are still looking like vegetables.
Okay.
So I wonder if I'm filling up a 5 gallon bucket, those composters. It'd be interesting to see what you expect someone to do with it after 2 weeks.
Mhm.
Because I could put mine outside.
Okay.
So that's just a question I've always wondered about.
And again, just for anybody who may watch this recording, I just want to also interject that you know you want to try to use as much of the food as possible because from an environmental perspective, you, you want to delay anything hitting the landfill as long as possible. And why not do that? Because what I've learned is food is one of the biggest issues in terms of the environment because what they happens is they cover the food so the food doesn't break down like it
Hmm.
should, and then that creates again additional methane, you know, from the landfill. So I try to be conscious of that, and I've come up with a few things. And when you mentioned the orange peel, it's one of the things I always tell people. Like, after I'm done with my orange, I keep my peels, and then after a certain point, I boil them. I wash them and then I boil them, and then I make
Hmm.
tea from those orange peels. You throw a ginger stick in there, some ginger, fresh ginger, and a couple of cinnamon sticks. You don't need to put nothing to sweeten it. It's done.
Yeah,
Mhm.
those
And
are
I
those are
use
those
the
other hacks. Yeah, that's
yes,
good stuff.
yeah. Do same thing with lemon peels. Lemon lime. Just you keep them. Again, wash them, and then just let them boil in the pot. Then that's the first round. Now I might get 2 pots out of a set of orange peels to make the tea. At that point, then
Hmm.
I'll boil them. I'll boil them again and use them as air freshener. Uh,
There you
then,
go.
all right, yeah, uh, I had some orange peels that actually sat out after I was done. They sat out so long, so then I took them and then put them in the garbage disposal. And to keep the smell of the garbage disposal, and you immediately got
Hmm.
the scent of the orange. Uh,
Yeah.
if they yeah, if they didn't go in the garbage disposal, I at one point, believe it or not, I grinded them, and my friend Mitchell, she used them to in like how you make banana bread.
Hmm.
She made like a whole wheat orange. I don't even know what to call it, but it was good. you know, so you literally can extend your food products, well beyond eating the core. Then after that, if you're composting, I say, uh, toss it in the composter. And then when you mentioned the vegetables, what I was doing, uh, for a long time, long before I got into doing the fruit peels, is I use that to make my broth.
Hmm.
So, the stems, whatever, uh, use that, make my broth, and then I would get rid of, the stems. But if you're composting, ideally just recycle,
Yeah. And in I think it was the Netherlands, they offered 3 chickens to anyone who would have a chicken. And so in taking these chickens, they were eating the food trash, the food waste, and it reduced tons of waste from the municipal landfill. Where
Mm.
if every family had chickens, we could reduce the amount of food waste that is picked up and thrown away. I mean, in a way that would also
Mm.
produce eggs, and we wouldn't need the egg industry. I mean, it's
Wow.
that serious. Like,
Yeah.
we would be killing 2 birds with one
Mm.
stone. And of
Hmm.
course, you think of the families back in yesteryear, that's how life was. You had some
Yes.
chickens in the back, not only did they eat the leftovers, they gave you eggs and sometimes
Mm.
a dinner, you know. But
Uh, I saw that pop up on a couple of the Facebook threads, but people say it jokingly. So again, I never really given it much thought. And then somebody asked me when I was going to get chickens. Uh, Never. But to your point, uh, because again, I'm thinking chicken farm. Like I'm
mhm.
thinking
Mhm.
that's like a step. That's outside of my knowledge. But again, because I'm trying to be concerned about the environment and the long term, you know, and then like I said, yeah, you got your, producing your eggs. Yeah, it's a self-contained system. It's beautiful,
And
Uh,
all you got to do is go on YouTube, you know.
And we're
uh,
Yeah.
talking. I mean, that sounds like we moved from the soils to the plants to the animals that may help with the compost. I'd like to, since you guys are talking like this, I'd like to introduce taste. Um, I think that one of the biggest, like, enlightening moments was the difference in taste of freshly grown produce versus those food items or whatever you want to call those that you buy out of stores.
That's
Yes.
a big deal. Cause
Yes.
and you know you get to pick it. It's from the ground to your hand to your mouth. It's something that is immediate, and like you say, the flavor is so different.
Yes. A couple of years ago, Mitchell and I were out in Nevada, and we went to a restaurant that was in a complex in a hotel, and they had you know, uh, farm to table, and I swear you could notice the difference in the eggs. Like it was just, and the thing about it is, that you get so used to eating food out of the supermarket that you don't know any better, you
Yeah.
know. And then you get hit with some real, you know, like I said, farm food, or recently, having meat with no antibiotics, like really grass fed. You feel the
Hmm.
difference. It tastes differently. So we are so conditioned to eating food, you know, outside of it being grown with, again, all kinds of chemicals. It's been sitting, you know, for a long period of time. Uh, So
Hmm.
yeah, you bring up a really good point, James. That I encourage anybody. You know what? Go find someplace and get you some farm to table food. It'll make you rethink, hmm? Because yeah, it is. It's a huge difference in taste. Mhm.
I've actually, and sometimes I have actually like blended the supermarket with the garden. Um,
Hmm.
and you know, like for instance, I don't like large tomatoes. I like the cherry or grape tomatoes.
Mhm.
But when you put those in a blender and you make a salsa or a quote unquote spaghetti sauce out of those, it's night and day. When you take that off the vine, literally you wash it and pop it in your mouth, and there's just the
Hmm.
sweet. It's just it because we're still literally, well, not literally, we're actually consuming energy.
Yes. Oh, don't get
Hundred
me
percent.
started. Good. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
You talking my language.
Yeah. Yeah. But you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. Mhm. Mhm. Uh, Let me ask, like, so both of you now. I know you've been gardening for a long time, Hashim, so you might not remember. I know when I first found out from you, James, that you were relatively you were at this game longer than I was, but we talked about that first experience of
Hmm.
growing your own food. Mitchell teases me because she said when I grew that first tomato outside, I didn't want to eat it. you know, and it was actually it was refreshing because I thought maybe I said maybe it's just me acting a fool because I grew something, but when you shared your experience and then I started reading about people, everybody goes through this, that when you first grow something, yeah, it's like this feeling like wow, I actually grew that. Uh, so I just want to know how long, yeah, did your attachment to the food that you grew, how long did it last before? And if you remember, Hashim, feel free to share. But do you
As soon
remember
as I
that
could pluck
moment?
it and put it in, as soon as I can go like this and go like that, it was that
Okay,
quick.
okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, mom's been always growing something, so I could always go outside and just grab something. I remember eating peppers, like fresh, just pick a pepper, eat it. Tomato, pick it and eat it. Standing in the garden, while I'm picking stuff to take upstairs. And it was just like, man, I can eat all of this right here. And I get lost just plucking and eating, you know?
Wow.
Um, and that was right from the very beginning. And it was where when you see those new leaves come up, to me, that was like amazing. You see this new leaf and then another leaf, and oh my God, is that a flower? And then now there's a fruit from where that flower, and just watching that process over time, it's like real life slow motion, you know?
Okay.
I loved
All
it.
right. So you
And
had you had you, real quick. You had the pleasure of being exposed to this as a young person growing up. Huh?
Hmm.
James, what was your experience before you actually got, I mean, to gardening, growing your own
Well, you
produce?
know what? I think that my first exposure wasn't edible gardening. My
Okay.
first exposure was I was between the ages of like 6 and 7, and I would walk to a cousin's home in Newark, New Jersey, and we lived approximately 4 blocks apart. And on the way at a certain place, and if someone from Newark, New Jersey hears this, they go, "Oh, wait a minute, I know what he's talking about." Madison Avenue and Farley and Baldwin. And I would walk past this woman's house who had these mammoth sunflowers. And literally, it just imprinted upon me at a very young age, nature in that way. Um, and in my case, for those, literally, it took me 50 years to replicate that.
Mm,
And now, and Hashim knows this, because we live, close to each other, and because I'm parting ways with the house, so I haven't done certain things this season. One of my biggest joys has been for the last 4 years, I've grown mammoth sunflowers. Whereas from the little seed that you would like to look like the same seed you eat out of there and crack the shell and eat the
mhm,
seed, from a seed of that nature to put it into the ground, and in 100 days it reach a height of between 12 to 14 feet.
mm,
It's
mm,
amazing. And
Hmm.
now I have a young man that lives across the street from me who gets to be imprinted with that same vision that I was as a kid.
Nice.
yeah,
And passing
uh,
it on is that key. That's to me critical when you can connect this process to people and have them understand the growing and what you can get from it, the sustainability for yourself, for your community. I mean, it's and of your ecosystem, like you mentioned earlier. Like
yeah,
you can't go wrong.
and that was really, one of my reasons for, trying to kick this off each year, try to get people interested because it's more than just the physical aspect of growing the food. Like most people think it's just a one-dimensional thing. I grow something and I eat it, okay. But there's so many other aspects, and you know, uh, there are health aspects outside of the food itself. Like I tell people, just having your hands in soil, you know, has health benefits. Yeah, they even talk about, from a meditation perspective, that gardening is a good place where all meditation is not done sitting quiet. Like you could have a Zen meditative experience just gardening. I mean, there's so many things. You talk about, you mentioned the word energy, and I said, whoa, don't get me started because, that's a whole other thing about getting people to understand we are all energy and what that actually means. So there's so many other benefits, and then my own health and wellness this year has been about reconnecting. Because I think the fact that we're disconnected is causing a lot of our health and mental issues. And I say, reconnecting on multiple levels. One, reconnecting with yourself, putting your mind, body, and spirit, aligning them, connecting with humanity, connecting with nature, and then connecting with divine, whatever you may call it. Now, because we're all running around here thinking we're separate from the whole, but we're not. So again, you start getting to, uh, we'll say the spiritual aspect of gardening, and it's on a whole nother level. So, like I said, going back to me growing that first tomato, which by the way was only about this big, because it was my tomato.
El
I grew
tomato.
it. Yeah.
Uh-huh. The best
Uh,
tomato
yes.
ever.
Uh, so again, it's really trying to get people to do this because there's so many benefits, not just for them, but as you say, the young man across the street now saw somebody doing it because I didn't grow up in the area where anybody was growing anything. You know, if you had a lawn, that was a big deal. I
Hmm.
don't remember any relatives, having a, no, that's not true. Yes, I did have one relative that was growing something in the back, but so, you you said it took you 50 years, and I'm probably, maybe a little bit longer for me. So,
Mm.
and I find, I find a lot of joy, in the learning,
Yeah.
you know, um, in the doing. And yeah, my feelings get hurt if I see something die. I'm like, oh damn, I screwed it up. Damn,
And
Hmm.
and
Mhm.
Darren, you know what? Like, I mean, when I talk about 50 years, I'm talking about a specific of a sunflower. But
Okay.
even from the standpoint of a garden, I've been gardening off and on for about 20 years now,
Wow. Okay.
and I did it as a stress relief. In my
Mhm.
case, being in law enforcement, wanted to ground or center myself, see the world differently. As Brother Hashim just stated, it's so many lessons to be learned by gardening. I
Mhm.
mean, it's just the connection you get and the vision when you see, like for instance, a climbing bean, a vine plant, whereas one day it's in a certain position, and then you come back the next morning and you see that not only has it wrapped itself around something for additional support, but then it's grown higher. And you think of, wow, if we could be like these plants, wrap
Oh,
ourselves around something that brings us or lifts us up, and then bring
Mhm.
someone with,
Yes. Yep.
you know.
That's
Oh,
and that's the metaphor. I love that you hit on that because it's the metaphor that I feel applies that people need to see more of. How plants show us how to live in
yes.
terms of how resilient they are. They come
Hmm.
back from, you stomp on them, you walk on them, and they'll still come in through the cracks. You know,
Yes.
I mean, they can be split down. The tree can get, struck by lightning and split in half, and still have that one half growing.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
know, we see a lot of forest fires burn things to the ground, and then you'll get that new growth. And
Yes.
it's just how plants are a part of us that I feel we need to really reconnect with.
Mhm.
Evolutionarily, we were developed around plants.
Yes.
Agriculturally, it's been in our people for as long as we've been on this planet. We've grown things. And
Hmm.
so in our recent history, in our modern society, we've separated from it, but now we're coming full circle. And
Yes.
everyone's
Mhm.
coming back to that same vibe.
Mhm.
So
Now,
the grounding, the growing, yeah, it's all gonna lead to, I feel, this being a better place.
yes. And you mentioned, the grounding, I, talk to people in health and wellness about the actual, what they, call grounding or earthing, about walking barefoot, you know,
Hmm.
and, why that has been proven that it has health benefits. And again, if you go up in an urban area, someone talking about walking barefoot, you like, no, that ain't
Set your
happening
foot on some
ever.
glass. Nope.
Right. You know, uh, so we become, and even if you go out in the park, you're thinking, if I'm walking barefoot, I'm going to step in some, dog, you know, uh, you know, crap. Like you just don't think about it. But then we begin to understand that we are part of the earth. We're connected to it, and because we have disconnected ourselves, also is a reason why we have the health issues. And simply,
Hmm.
if you got a garden or you got some grass, just walk in it barefoot. Go out gardening with your hands in the soil. You know what? Yeah, your feet will get dirty, but it has proven, and anybody can look up grounding or earthing, you know,
Hmm.
uh, to see the actual health benefits. Before you go popping a pill, you might just need to take a slow walk with no shoes on. uh, so
Hmm.
yeah,
And
go
the
ahead.
other side of that is these pills. come from plants or came from plants.
Yes,
The
originally, yep.
synthetic versions that they have over the counter came from things that they used to grow and use as poultices, or they would steep them
Mhm.
and make teas. So
Yes.
yeah,
You know,
getting into the natural way of doing it, natural
yes.
medicine.
Which I'm a big fan, proponent of, and that's when you get into the different herbs and the barks and all that, stuff, because you're absolutely right that, what original pharmaceuticals came from plants, and now they have to put something in it, all right? Because if they
Hmm.
see, you can't patent anything from nature, so they got to put something in the medicine to make it unique, so then they can put a patent on it. You don't
And
know
you
what
know they're
that
trying to,
means.
yep, and they're
Good.
trying to do that with certain seeds, so that they
Mm,
say this
yes.
tomato was genetically created in our space, so we are
Yes.
patenting this tomato.
Yes.
Um, so it's kind of crazy how they're getting with controlling even the growth of food from a seed.
Yes.
So
I don't want to get too deep into that because I think that'd be another discussion
I
topic.
agree. I
Yeah, but
agree.
we could just talk about the benefits, all right, and why folks need to get up in here, get yourself some soil, take some seeds from something that you already ate,
Hmm.
get yourself a couple of pots, throw those seeds in, what, and start the process. There's no reason uh, that everybody shouldn't be trying this at some level because it's not as expensive. I mean, you get a bag of soil, you can split it with somebody,
Hmm.
you know. But definitely start. And I like the points that you guys raised, and I like thinking again about you look at it one day and the plant might be like this. You come back, you know, the next day and it's done, it really just shot up. I also tell people, even planting the seeds, even if they don't produce any, you know, fruit or vegetable, it'll produce a plant. And that plant in of itself has benefits. Like you mentioned the pineapple heads, Mitchell has probably about six of them now, where she kept the head of it, stuck it in some water, the roots start to grow, you stick it in some dirt, and it now becomes, a plant. You know, I think it also the nature is such a good example. Again, living in abundance. You talk about resilience, abundance. Like I said, you take one, say one cucumber, and the number of seeds you get out of it, you know, and then those seeds will produce more. It is such a metaphor for living. Mhm.
Hmm.
Uh, so I hope you guys get some more metaphors. I really think the next discussion should be on the benefits, on multiple layers of gardening and trying to get,
All right.
again, encourage more people to, you know, jump in on this because it's a lifesaver, really, in
Hmm.
multiple ways. It's you know, so anything anybody else want to bring up? I don't want to hold you because we've gone over an hour. Mhm. All right, all right. Well, again, as always, it has been a pleasure. I like the topic. I like the input from you two brothers, and I hope we can get some more people to join in the discussion. Mhm.
Absolutely.
Thank you, brother.
Absolutely.
All right.
All
Yeah,
right.
again, you brothers have a good evening. All right. You know, make sure you eat something healthy now. All right.
Absolutely.
All right.
Uh,
All right.
all right. All right.
Peace, brothers.
Peace.